Welcome to Blood and Truth. Here we dive deep into real crime cases, bring forgotten stories to light, and amplify the voices of those fighting for justice. This channel isn't just about telling crime stories, it's about remembering victims, uncovering truths, and raising awareness. Every case is someone's story, every truth matters, every fight for justice counts. If you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because we're here with a new truth every week. Here stabbed his 7-month pregnant girlfriend 37 times, killing her. This wasn't just a crime, it was the calculated murder of not one, but 2 lives. How did such a tragedy begin? Let's uncover the dark secrets behind this horrific story. Chapter 1. The Last Night. Italy. May 28th, 2023. Midnight. An unusual silence had fallen over the small town. Around 11 p.m., Giulia's life came to a standstill, but it would be hours before anyone realized what had happened. 29-year-old Giulia was 7 months pregnant. She had dreams for the future. But that night, those dreams were cut short. When her absence was first noticed the next morning, a man calmly picked up his phone. It was close to 9 a.m. when Alejandro Impaciello called the police station. His voice was calm, tired, but composed. "My girlfriend Giulia is missing. We had an argument last night. She took her suitcase and left. I have no idea where she went." Police arrived at Alejandro's home quickly. The young man greeted them inside. He wore a simple t-shirt, and his eyes showed not sleeplessness, but traces of strange preparation. He showed them around the house. "Everything's in its place," he said. "But Giulia's gone. She took her suitcase from here." He pointed to footprints still at the door. One officer turned his head. There was dust at the door, but no fresh footprints. They looked more carefully. They couldn't see Giulia's footprints, but something else caught their attention inside. A heavy, sharp cleaning smell. Bleach. The living room floor was still damp. The carpet had been removed. In one corner, parquet that looked freshly wiped, and, on a chair leg, a dried, red stain. "Did you go out at all last night?" the police asked. Alejandro hesitated. "No, I was just inside. I was very shaken after the argument." The police felt their first suspicion right then. A woman, a 7-month pregnant woman, had taken her suitcase and left in the middle of the night after an argument. But her cell phone, ID, charger were all at home. Even Giulia's favorite ring was still on the nightstand. Alejandro's story was very organized, but perhaps too organized. As if someone had tried to make it look like nothing had happened inside. Chapter 2. Who was Giulia? Giulia Tramontano was a woman who loved life. When she moved to Milan in 2020, she was seeking a new beginning. She quickly rose in architecture and real estate. She wanted to start her own business, live freely, and build a family. Her meeting with Alejandro coincided with this period. He was a cheerful, talkative man who worked at a bar. Giulia said she felt safe with him, but darkness was slowly advancing in the background. Alejandro's past wasn't as behind him as she thought. Previous relationships, unresolved accounts, and the desire to control, all of these were silently tracking Alejandro's approach to Giulia. Police examined Giulia's last 24 hours. The messages she sent to her mother Loredana and close friend Chiara that night played a critical role. "This argument destroyed me. I feel terrible. I'm scared." The messages revealed that Giulia was emotionally broken and anxious. Despite these messages, Alejandro told police everything was just a small misunderstanding. "We argued, but it wasn't something to make a big deal about. She was a bit emotional." But the bleach in the house, missing carpets, wet parquet, and Alejandro's failure to call police for hours, everything screamed that this was something to make a big deal about. The first question in the officers' minds was where Giulia had gone. But the first detective examining the crime scene changed the question. Did Giulia leave, or was she sent away? Chapter 3. The Double Life. Alejandro Impaciello appeared from the outside to be urban, attractive, and self-confident. But behind the eye-catching style and polite smile on Milan's streets lay another story. Born in 1993, he hadn't yet turned 30, but he had learned to impress people. He worked at a luxury bar, sharing tables with the city's elite every night. Rich people, influencers, real estate investors. In this environment, appearing successful was more important than actually being successful, and Alejandro played this role masterfully. His co-workers described him as charismatic but superficial. He didn't reveal his true feelings, but was known as that easygoing guy who brightened the atmosphere. Everyone thought he was living a happy life, but behind the scenes, reality was much more complicated. In the early days of his relationship with Giulia, Alejandro was kind and compassionate. He skillfully chose the right words to make a good impression. But this wasn't a language of love, it was a strategy. Alejandro was a manipulator. Shortly after they started living together, his true face began to show. Jokes were no longer warm. Subtle needling and mockery began to pierce Giulia's heart. He made fun of Giulia's way of speaking, made veiled references to Southern people being culturally underdeveloped. He belittled her favorite football team in front of everyone, systematically putting down what Giulia valued. At first, Giulia thought this was just Alejandro's sense of humor, but over time she understood. This wasn't a joke. It was a form of humiliation. Chapter 4. The Pregnancy. Toward the end of 2022, Giulia noticed strange changes in her body. Extreme fatigue, nausea, missed periods. She suspected and took a pregnancy test. The result was definitive. She was pregnant. Surprise, fear, love, everything mixed together. Even though things weren't perfect with Alejandro, Giulia had always been warm to the idea of starting a family. She planned to tell Alejandro the news during a quiet dinner. She wanted to see his happiness, maybe some anxiety, but at least some excitement. But Alejandro's first reaction was a single question. "Are you sure?" In that moment, Giulia felt everything. There was neither joy nor fear in his expression, just emptiness. After that moment, he never brought up the topic again. He didn't ask about doctor visits or discuss future plans. Giulia was left alone, not physically, but emotionally. But she still didn't give up. She wanted to have this baby. Despite Alejandro's indifference, she had made her decision with a mother's instinct. Chapter 5. The Other Woman. While Giulia continued her pregnancy, Alejandro's other life was also changing. At the beginning of 2023, Algura also announced she was pregnant. Now Alejandro's lies were collapsing one on top of another. Like Giulia, Algura didn't know he had another relationship. This time Alejandro panicked. The idea of having a child with one of two women shook him. Unlike Giulia, Algura hadn't made her decision yet. Alejandro thought the child shouldn't be born. He suggested abortion to Algura, telling her he would be by her side in any case, not out of empathy, but just to maintain control. He went with her to the procedure to ensure Algura's pregnancy actually ended. Now only Giulia remained, and she had no intention of backing down. Chapter 6. The Poisoning Plan. Giulia's refusal of abortion was a symbol of Alejandro losing the control he had been losing internally. His plans had been upset by Giulia's unexpected decision. He felt he could no longer control events, and this fed his dark and controlling side even more. Toward the end of 2022, he began systematic research on toxic substances. He researched ways to harm people undetected on the internet. He studied many substances from plant-based toxins to industrial chemicals. Cyanide, ricin, arsenic. But most substances were either difficult to obtain or left easily detectable traces in the body. Finally, he made his decision. Rodent poisons could be obtained without prescription. Some types slowly damage the body, causing symptoms like internal bleeding, weakness, and nausea. Moreover, these symptoms were similar enough to be confused with pregnancy-related complications. At the beginning of 2023, Alejandro began implementing his plan. During this process, he appeared to be by Giulia's side and supporting her. But in reality, He was mixing microscopic doses of poison into her drinks and food. A slow progressing, insidious plan. Giulia soon began experiencing constant fatigue, headaches, nausea, and severe abdominal pain. She told her relatives, "I guess my pregnancy is difficult." But the truth was much darker. However, Alejandro's patience was running out. The poison wasn't working as fast as he had hoped. Giulia's body was resisting. The baby continued to develop. His first plan had failed. He needed to find a new way, and this time it had to be sharper, more ruthless. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. The real turning point came when Algura found current and intimate photos of Alejandro with Giulia on his phone. This was an accident, but it changed everything. The photos were clear evidence that they were still together. Eventually, the two women met at the hotel where Algura worked. They were tense, but determined. Algura told Giulia what Alejandro had said, that they had broken up, that the baby wasn't his, and the fake DNA test. Giulia responded quietly and clearly. The DNA test was fake. No such test had ever been done. The pregnancy timing also matched exactly with when she was with Alejandro. Every passing minute, the fog in Algura's mind cleared. They realized they weren't each other's rivals. They were caught in the same web. Chapter 8. The Final Decision. When Giulia returned home, she immediately told Alejandro everything. She said she knew about his lies and that they wouldn't be together anymore, that she was moving to Naples and never wanted to see him again. That night, she sent a short message to her mother and sister. "It's over. My decision is final." For Alejandro, everything had spiraled out of control. Giulia no longer believed him. The game was over. The image and control he had built for years had collapsed in a single night. Chapter 9. The Murder. That day, tension was high at home. Alejandro tried to talk to Giulia, but Giulia was like a wall. She continued packing her things. Alejandro shouted, threatened, took refuge in words of love, but Giulia remained silent. The more she remained silent, the more Alejandro's anger grew. Around 10 p.m., Giulia had closed her suitcase and was walking toward the door. She wore a beige coat that didn't show her pregnancy. Alejandro had one last attempt. For him, convincing Giulia was no longer just a matter of love or pride. He was terrified of losing control, of his life slipping through his hands. His tone turned to pleading, and at that moment Alejandro's eyes drifted to the kitchen. The bread knife he had used earlier was still on the counter. His brain, words, logic went silent. Instinctive panic took over. Giulia was a few steps from the door. Alejandro quickened his steps. With his left hand, he grabbed Giulia's coat. Giulia stumbled. Then he took the kitchen knife in his right hand. The first blow pierced Giulia's back. Giulia screamed, not in pain, but in shock. She tried to turn, but Alejandro continued. He swung the knife again and again, to her back, her side, the side of her neck. Giulia was no longer screaming. She was trying to breathe, collapsing to the ground. She held her belly with her hands, still trying to protect her baby. This was her last movement. 37 knife wounds. Over time, the knife began tearing rather than cutting. Alejandro's hands were covered in blood. His breathing was irregular. Neighbors who still remember that moment said they heard a muffled gurgle from downstairs that night, more like a suppressed death rattle than a scream. Giulia's lifeless body collapsed to the ground in the open area between the living room and kitchen. Blood spread across the parquet, reaching the edge of the suitcase. Her baby was now buried in silence with her. Chapter 10. The Cover-Up. Alejandro experienced a brief freeze. He was still holding the knife. He wasn't even aware of the warmth of the blood. His hands were shaking. He had difficulty breathing. Then suddenly reality returned. The first thing he did was throw the knife toward the sink. He put it under running water, but the blood seemed frozen. He poured soap, pressed with a sponge. Then he gave up. His hands had already touched everywhere anyway. His eye fell on Giulia's phone. The phone had fallen out of the coat pocket on the ground. On the screen was an unanswered message from her mother. "Are you okay?" Alejandro immediately began planning. He took the phone, used her fingerprint, unlocked it. he sent a short message to Giulia's mother. "I need some time alone. Please don't call me." Then he also messaged her closest friend. "I'm very confused. I don't want to talk to anyone right now." The messages were meant to give the impression that Giulia had deliberately disappeared. But there was a problem. The body. The rest of the night was spent in a panic-driven attempt to clean and hide evidence. He tried to clean blood, removed carpets, changed clothes, and eventually moved Giulia's body to his car to dispose of it in a remote forest area. Chapter 11. The investigation. When police arrived the next morning, after Alejandro's call, they immediately noticed inconsistencies. The heavy bleach smell, missing carpets, damp floors, and blood traces that had been incompletely cleaned. The investigation quickly uncovered digital evidence, Alejandro's research history about poisons, the fake DNA test he had shown Algura, and security camera footage showing him carrying heavy bags to the garage multiple times after Giulia's disappearance. When confronted with mounting evidence, blood traces in his car, manipulated documents, witness testimonies, and surveillance footage, Alejandro's story began to crumble. Chapter 12. Justice and Legacy. On June 1st, 2023, police found Giulia's partially burned body in a wooded area near Sinago. The forensic report confirmed 37 stab wounds, many delivered from behind while she was defenseless. Alejandro eventually confessed under the weight of evidence. The trial revealed his narcissistic personality traits, lack of empathy, and dangerous behavior when losing control. Giulia's death sparked massive protests across Italy, demanding stricter laws against femicide. Her sister Carla addressed the crowds. "My sister died because someone chose to destroy her when he realized he couldn't control her. This isn't just her story, it's all of ours." The court sentenced Alejandro to life imprisonment. The judge stated, "This wasn't momentary anger. This was planned annihilation. A woman and her 7-month-old baby were torn from life. This is a crime against all the vulnerable in our society." Giulia's story ended, but it didn't remain silent. Her death resonated in society, becoming a call for better protection of women and earlier hearing of victims. This documentary also became her voice. But there are still too many stories we need to discuss, too many questions waiting for answers. Don't forget to subscribe to continue following the dark traces of true crimes together.